The rain drummed against the window like impatient fingers, steady and relentless in the Tucson darkness. Samuel Crawford Jr. sat motionless beside his father's bed, watching the old man's chest rise and fall with labored breaths. The pendulum clock in the corner marked 11 at night, each tick another second stolen from what little time remained. Sam Jr. was 48 years old, his face weathered by the Arizona sun into a landscape of premature lines. He'd inherited his father's strong jaw and steel gray eyes, but where the old man had once carried himself like a cavalry officer, Sam Jr. moved with the cautious economy of someone who'd learned early that life took more than it gave. "You should rest, Pa," Sam Jr. said, his voice barely rising above the rain. "Doctor said you need sleep." The figure in the bed stirred. Samuel Crawford Sr., 88 years old and thin as dried leather stretched over bone, opened his eyes. They were still sharp, still bright with something that might have been fever or might have been determination. "Son," the old man's voice cracked like desert stones splitting in the heat. "I don't have much time left. There's a story I never told anyone, not even your mother, about a woman who came before her." Sam Jr. felt his spine stiffen. In 40 years, his father had never mentioned anyone before his mother, Sarah. The old man had always spoken of her with the reverence reserved for saints, and after her death when Sam Jr. was 8, his father had raised him alone with the same quiet devotion. "You were married before?" Sam Jr. leaned forward, the chair creaking beneath him. "Not married, more complicated than that." The old man's eyes drifted toward the window, seeing something beyond the rain-streaked glass, beyond the present moment entirely. "It was 1882. I was 48 years old." The room seemed to tilt, the shadows deepening, as if the past itself was pressing through the walls. Sam Jr. said nothing. He understood that some stories demanded silence to be born. "Her name was Grace Hartley," his father continued, each word measured and deliberate. "And the first time I saw her, she was dying." The rain continued its percussion against the window, but Sam Jr. no longer heard it. His father's voice had changed, grown younger somehow, pulling them both backward through 4 decades to a desert that burned under an unforgiving sun. August 19th, 1882, Cochise County, Arizona Territory. The heat was a physical presence, a crushing weight that made the air shimmer and dance above the desert floor. Samuel Crawford urged his Tennessee Walker forward, the horse's hooves kicking up small clouds of dust that hung suspended in the stillness before settling back to earth. The temperature had climbed past 110 degrees, and even though it was past 5 in the afternoon, the sun showed no mercy. Sam was a compact man, just under 6 feet, with shoulders broadened by years of cavalry service and ranch work. His face had been carved by wind and sun into something resembling the landscape itself, all hard angles and deep creases. The Stetson hat he wore had faded from black to a mottled gray, its brim pulled low against the glare. His shirt, once white linen, clung to his back with sweat. He'd spent the day in Wilcox, 8 miles north, picking up supplies and checking his meager mail at the general store. The saddlebags hanging from his walker carried flour, coffee, tobacco, and 3 boxes of ammunition for his Winchester Model 1873. The rifle itself rested in its scabbard, within easy reach. This was still rough country, even in 1882, and a man alone was a man vulnerable. Sam's canteen hung from his saddle horn, maybe a third full. He lifted it, shook it to gauge the weight, then took a careful sip. 8 ounces left, enough to get home if he didn't push the horse too hard. The Crawford Ranch lay 6 miles south, a modest spread of 160 acres that he'd claimed under the Homestead Act 12 years ago, back when Sarah was still alive. The thought of Sarah brought the familiar ache, dull now after a decade but never truly gone. Plague had taken her in 3 days, so fast he'd barely had time to understand she was dying before she was dead. Their son, his Sam Jr., had been just 8 years old. The boy lived with his grandmother in Tucson now, attending school, learning to read and write and do sums. Sam sent money every month and saw the boy summers. It was better that way. A 48-year-old widower living alone in the desert was no fit guardian for a growing child. The walker snorted and tossed its head, pulling Sam from his thoughts. He looked up and saw them. Vultures. 5, maybe 6, circling high above the southern horizon, their flight lazy and patient. They were perhaps 400 yards away, drifting on thermals invisible to human eyes. Sam's hand moved instinctively to the rifle, though he didn't draw it yet. Vultures meant death, or something close to it. Could be a steer that had wandered too far from water. Could be a coyote that had lost a fight. Could be something worse. He touched his heels to the walker's flanks, and the horse moved from a walk to a trot, then to a canter. The desert floor blurred beneath them, mesquite and creosote bush whipping past in streaks of gray-green. The vultures grew larger, more distinct. Sam could see their naked red heads now, turning as they watched him approach. At 200 yards, he saw the cross. His first thought was that someone had marked a grave, stuck 2 pieces of wood in the ground to commemorate where they'd buried their dead. But as he closed the distance, the shape became clearer. Taller, not a grave marker. Something else. At 100 yards, he saw the figure. Someone was tied to the cross, arms spread wide like some perverse mockery of crucifixion. The walker balked, catching the scent of something that frightened it. Sam had to fight the reins, using his thighs to squeeze the horse forward. He could hear his own heartbeat now, a drum in his ears, louder than the walker's hoofbeats. At 50 yards, he knew it was a woman. Sam kicked hard and the walker surged forward in a flat gallop, eating up the remaining distance in seconds. He yanked the horse to a sliding stop and was out of the saddle before the animal had fully halted, his boots hitting the ground and carrying him forward in 3 long strides. She hung there like a broken doll, wrists bound to the horizontal beam with manila rope, feet barely touching the ground. Her dress, once blue cotton, hung in tatters. Her skin, everywhere Sam could see it, was burned red and black, blistered and peeling. Her face was tilted down, dark hair matted and tangled, lips cracked and bleeding. She wasn't moving. "Ma'am?" Sam's voice came out hoarse. He stepped closer, reaching up to touch her throat, searching for a pulse. Her skin was hot as a stoveplate, but beneath his fingers, he felt it. Faint, rapid, but there. 130 beats per minute, maybe more. She was alive. He pulled his Bowie knife from his belt, the blade 9 inches of Sheffield steel that he kept sharp enough to shave with. He didn't cut the ropes from above. That would drop her 8 feet straight down onto her head. Instead, he sliced through the binding on her right wrist first, then moved fast to support her weight as he cut the left. She collapsed into his arms, lighter than she should have been, all the water weight burned out of her. Sam lowered her carefully to the ground, laying her on her side in the recovery position he'd learned in the cavalry. If she vomited, she wouldn't choke. He pulled his canteen free and wet his handkerchief with precious water, using it to moisten her lips. Not too much. Giving water too fast to someone this dehydrated could send them into shock. Her tongue was swollen, filling her mouth. Her eyes, when they fluttered half open, were sunken deep in their sockets. He'd seen men die of thirst during the Apache campaigns. This woman had maybe 12 hours left, if that. She made a sound, barely human, something between a whimper and a moan. "You're safe now," Sam said, though he had no idea if that was true. "I've got you." Her lips moved. He leaned closer, putting his ear near her mouth. "Wade," she whispered. The word carried on breath that smelled of copper and decay. "Who's Wade?" Sam asked, but she'd already slipped back into unconsciousness. He stood and looked at the cross itself, mesquite wood, thick as a man's forearm, lashed together with more manila rope. The vertical beam had been planted deep, requiring significant effort to set. This wasn't the work of one man. Multiple people had done this, and they'd done it deliberately, methodically, with the intention that whoever hung here would suffer. Sam's jaw tightened until his teeth ached. He'd seen cruelty in his 50 years. He'd participated in it, back during the war and the campaigns that followed. But this was something else. This was calculated torture dressed up as justice. He knelt and lifted the woman again, cradling her against his chest. She weighed maybe 90 pounds, 15 less than she should. Her head lolled against his shoulder as he carried her to the walker. The horse, calmer now, stood patient as Sam maneuvered the woman into the saddle, then climbed up behind her. He positioned her so she sat sideways in front of him, her back against his chest, his left arm wrapped around her waist to keep her from falling. The ride back to Crawford Ranch took 75 minutes. Sam kept the walker to a walk, unwilling to risk jarring the woman's already traumatized body. The sun began its descent toward the western horizon. the temperature dropping degree by precious degree. He used his free hand to remove his vest, draping it over the woman's burned shoulders. She stirred once, mumbling something he couldn't make out, then went still again. Sam tried to piece together what he knew. A woman, early 20s if he had to guess, left to die in the desert. Someone named Wade was involved. This was Arizona territory, where law was thin as paper and men with money could buy their way out of damn near anything. He'd need help. Federal help. The Crawford Ranch appeared as the sun touched the horizon, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. It wasn't much. A two-room house built from ponderosa pine he'd hauled down from the mountains, a barn with 6 stalls for horses, a chicken coop, and a well with a windmill pump. The whole property was surrounded by a 5-foot mesquite fence he'd built himself, more to keep livestock in than intruders out. Sam rode straight to the house, dismounted, and carried the woman inside. His bedroom was the larger of the 2 rooms, dominated by a bed frame he'd constructed from ironwood. He laid her on the corn husk mattress, then moved quickly to gather supplies. Water came first. He drew a bucket from the well, cold and clear from 40 feet down. He filled a tin cup and returned to the bedroom. Kneeling beside the bed, he lifted the woman's head and brought the cup to her lips, tilting it slowly. Just a teaspoon at a time, let her body absorb it. Too much, too fast, and her kidneys would fail. She swallowed reflexively, coughed, swallowed again. Her eyes opened, unfocused and glassy. "Slow," Sam said, "just a little at a time." He gave her water for 10 minutes, never more than a mouthful, before setting the cup aside. Next came the burns. He'd treated sunburn before, knew that the priority was cooling the skin without shocking the system. He soaked clean linen rags in well water and laid them across her arms, her legs, her face. The cloth steamed slightly when it touched her skin. The woman's breathing began to slow, settling into something more regular. Sam sat back on his heels and allowed himself a moment to really look at her. Mid-20s, maybe 22 or 23, dark hair that would be pretty once it was washed and brushed. Strong features, a face that suggested intelligence and will. Her hands, even blistered and raw, showed calluses. She was no stranger to work. Who would do this to her? And why? Sam stood and walked to the small desk in the corner of his bedroom. He kept a locked box there, containing his important papers and a small amount of cash. He opened it and removed a sheet of writing paper and a pencil. He'd need to contact Marshal David Garrett in Tucson. Garrett was an old friend from the cavalry days, one of the few men Sam trusted completely. If anyone could navigate the legal complexities of what had happened here, it was Garrett. But first, the woman needed to survive the night. Sam returned to her side and continued the slow process of rehydration. Every 15 minutes, he gave her water. Every hour, he changed the cooling cloths. Somewhere past midnight, she began to mumble in her sleep, words that came thick and slurred. "Mama," she said. "Mama, I tried." Later, as the moon reached its apex, she spoke again. "Papa, I'm sorry, I couldn't pay." And once, near dawn, her eyes snapped open with sudden clarity, and she grabbed Sam's wrist with surprising strength. "He'll come back," she whispered, her voice desperate. "Wade, he'll come back for me." "No one's taking you anywhere," Sam said, and meant it. She held his gaze for a long moment, searching his face for something. Then her grip loosened, and she slipped back into sleep. Sam sat in the chair beside the bed and watched the sun rise through the window. He hadn't slept. Couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sarah dying of plague, her skin burning with fever, her lungs filling with fluid he couldn't drain. He'd been helpless then. He wouldn't be helpless now. The woman survived the first day. The second day, her fever broke, and she managed to sit up long enough to eat a few spoonfuls of beef broth. Sam had boiled it from bones, adding salt to help her body retain water. She kept it down. On the third day, she was strong enough to speak. "My name is Grace," she said, her voice still rough but gaining strength. "Grace Hartley." Sam had been checking the bandages on her wrists where the rope had cut deep. He looked up and found her watching him with eyes that were surprisingly clear, surprisingly fierce. "Samuel Crawford," he said. "You're at my ranch. You're safe." "Am I?" Grace asked, and there was something in her tone that made Sam pause. You are as long as you're here, he said carefully. Grace studied him for a long moment, and Sam had the uncomfortable sensation of being measured, weighed, evaluated. Mr. Crawford, she said finally, do you know who Benjamin Wade is? Sam shook his head. The name meant nothing to him. He owns half of Wilcox, Grace continued. Cattle, land, businesses. He has the sheriff in his pocket and two judges besides. My father owes him $2,000 from a failed investment in livestock. 3 years ago, Wade saved my father's life during a blizzard, found him half frozen, and brought him home. Since then, my father has owed Wade what he calls a life debt. Sam said nothing, just listened. He'd learned in the cavalry that the best way to get information was to shut up and let people talk. 6 months ago, Wade came to our house with a proposal. Grace's voice remained steady, matter of fact, but Sam could see her hands trembling. He wanted to marry me. Said if I agreed, my father's monetary debt would be forgiven. The life debt would be satisfied. You refused, Sam said. It wasn't a question. 3 times, Grace confirmed. The last time, Wade said he would teach me obedience. That night, he and 4 of his men came to the house. They took me into the desert and tied me to that cross. Wade said 3 days under the sun would help me understand the value of his protection. Sam felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. It wasn't anger. Not yet. Anger was hot and immediate. This was something older, something that had calcified during years of watching powerful men abuse the powerless. How long were you out there, he asked. 2 days, maybe part of a third. I lost track. And no one came to check on you? Grace's laugh was bitter. Wade told my father I'd run away. Papa was too frightened to contradict him. Too weak. Sam stood and walked to the window, looking out at the ranch that had been his life for a decade. He'd chosen this isolation deliberately after Sarah's death, chosen to avoid the complications that came with other people, with their needs and demands and inevitable betrayals. He'd built walls, not just of mesquite wood, but of habit and intention. Grace Hartley was asking him to tear those walls down. Mr. Crawford, Grace said, and there was something new in her voice now, something that made Sam turn around. I don't have money, I don't have land, I can't pay you for saving my life, but I can offer you something else. Sam felt his stomach tighten. He thought he knew where this was going, and he didn't like it. Grace pushed herself up to a sitting position. Wincing as the movement pulled at her healing burns, she looked directly at Sam, and there was no shame in her eyes, no hesitation. Save me from Wade, she said. Protect me, and I'll give you whatever you want. 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, for as long as you keep me safe. The words hung in the air between them like something solid, something you could reach out and touch. Sam's mouth had gone dry. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Grace's voice was firm, unyielding. I'm not asking you to take something. I'm offering to give something, on my terms, my choice. You're desperate, Sam said. Heat stroke makes people say things they don't mean. I was desperate 3 days ago when I was dying on that cross, Grace shot back. I'm thinking clearly now. Wade wanted to own me, to take away my choice, my control. What I'm offering you is different. I'm choosing. Do you understand? I'm choosing where I belong and who I belong with. Sam turned away, unable to meet her gaze. His hands were shaking. He was 48 years old. He'd been alone for 10 years, living like a ghost in a house full of memories. What Grace was offering, it wasn't right. It was a transaction born of desperation, no matter what she claimed. But if he refused, where would she go? Back to her father who couldn't protect her? Back to Wade, who'd already tried to kill her once? I'll protect you, Sam heard himself say, but not because of any promise you think you owe me. That's exactly why I want to give it, Grace said softly. Because you didn't ask, because you don't want to take. That makes you different from every other man I've known. Sam closed his eyes. Let me get you healthy first. Then we'll talk about what happens next. But even as he said it, he knew the conversation wasn't over. Grace Hartley had made her offer, and Sam Crawford, despite every instinct screaming at him to refuse, wasn't sure he had the strength to turn it down. On the morning of the 4th day, Sam rode into Wilcox alone, leaving Grace asleep at the ranch, with a loaded Colt revolver on the bedside table and instructions to shoot anyone who wasn't him. The town was already awake when he arrived at 8 in the morning, the main street busy with wagons and horses and people going about their business. Wilcox in 1882 was a town of 800 souls, most of them involved in ranching or the businesses that supported ranching. The railroad had come through 2 years earlier, bringing prosperity and trouble in equal measure. Sam's first stop was the telegraph office. Western Union had a small operation next to the general store, run by a thin man with spectacles named Morrison, who looked like a strong wind would blow him over. "Need to send a wire to Tucson," Sam said, laying 50 cents on the counter. Morrison slid a form across. "Write your message here. 10 words for the base rate." Sam took the pencil and wrote carefully, conscious that every word cost money. "Garrett, stop. Wade attempted murder. Stop, victim safe here. Stop, need help, urgent, stop. Crawford," he counted, 9 words. "Perfect." Morrison read the message, his eyebrows climbing toward his hairline. "This about Benjamin Wade?" "That's what it says," Sam replied evenly. "Mr. Crawford, I don't know what you're mixed up in, but Wade's a powerful man in this county. Powerful men don't take kindly to accusations." Sam met his gaze steadily. "Send the telegram." Morrison hesitated, then shrugged. "Your funeral." He moved to the telegraph key and began tapping out the message in Morse code, the clicks sharp and rhythmic, in the small office. Sam waited until Morrison confirmed the message had been received in Tucson, then turned to leave. As he reached the door, Morrison called out, "Mr. Crawford, be careful. Wade has a lot of friends in Wilcox." Sam touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement and stepped back into the morning heat. His next stop was the general store, where he purchased additional medical supplies, more food, and another box of rifle ammunition. The proprietor, a heavy-set man named Jenkins, made small talk about the weather and cattle prices. But Sam could see the man's eyes tracking him with unusual interest. News traveled fast in small towns. As Sam was loading his purchases into his saddlebags, he heard boots on the wooden sidewalk behind him. He turned slowly, his hand resting casually on the butt of his Colt. 3 men stood there, cowboys by the look of them, wearing dusty work clothes and gun belts. The one in front was tall and rangy, with a scar that ran from his left eyebrow down to his jaw. "You Samuel Crawford?" the scarred man asked. "I am. Heard you sent a telegram about Mr. Wade." Sam said nothing, just waited. "Mr. Wade's a respected man in this town," the cowboy continued. "Helped a lot of folks. Don't take kindly to having his name dragged through mud by strangers." "I'm not a stranger," Sam said mildly. "I've ranched here for 12 years. Kept to yourself, though. Never been part of the community. Now you show up making accusations." The cowboy's hand drifted toward his gun. "That don't sit right." Sam's hand hadn't moved from his own Colt. His voice remained calm, conversational. "I found a woman tied to a cross in the desert, dying of thirst and exposure. She told me who did it. That's not an accusation. That's a fact. Wade says the girl ran away. Says she's probably with family in Tucson by now." "Then Wade's a liar." The tension ratcheted up another notch. The 3 cowboys spread out slightly, and Sam noticed that other people on the street were backing away, giving them room. This was going to get ugly. Then a new voice cut through the standoff. "Gentlemen?" They all turned. A man in a black suit had emerged from the saloon across the street, a badge pinned to his vest. Sheriff Clayton, Sam remembered. He'd met the man once or twice over the years, but had never had cause to interact with him much. Clayton was maybe 50, with a mustache that drooped down past his chin and eyes that looked perpetually tired. He walked towards them with the careful gait of someone trying to appear more sober than he actually was. "Now, boys," Clayton said, addressing the 3 cowboys, "let's not have trouble in the middle of town. Bad for business." The scarred cowboy jerked his head toward Sam. "He's spreading lies about Mr. Wade." "That's so?" Clayton turned to Sam. "What's this about, Crawford?" Sam made a decision. Tell the truth, but not all of it. "I found an injured woman on my property 4 days ago. Severe dehydration, rope burns, clearly the victim of a crime. She mentioned the name Wade. I sent a telegram to Marshal Garrett in Tucson because I figured this was bigger than county jurisdiction." Clayton's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Marshall Garrett, huh? That's federal. Bit of an overreaction, don't you think? Attempted murder is a serious crime, Sam said. Seemed appropriate. Where's this woman now? Safe. I'll need to talk to her. Take a statement. Sam shook his head. She'll talk to Marshall Garrett when he arrives. No one else. Clayton's jaw tightened. Mr. Crawford, I'm the law in Cochise County. If there's been a crime, I need to investigate. Then investigate, Sam said. Start by asking Wade where he was 4 nights ago. The sheriff's face flushed red, but before he could respond, the scarred cowboy stepped forward again. Boss wants to talk to you, Crawford. Wants to clear this up man to man. Wade wants to meet? Sam asked. Tonight, at his ranch, just you and him. Talk things out civilized-like. Sam almost laughed. Walking onto Wade's property alone at night would be suicide. Tell your boss if he wants to talk, he can come to me. Daylight, neutral ground. The cowboy's scar pulled tight as his face twisted into a sneer. You scared, old man? Careful, Sam said quietly. Something in his voice made all 3 cowboys reassess. Sam Crawford might be 48, might be living alone on a hardscrabble ranch, but there was something in his eyes that spoke of experiences they didn't want to test. This ain't over, the scarred cowboy muttered, but he stepped back. Sheriff Clayton cleared his throat. Crawford, you're making powerful enemies. Might want to reconsider your course. Noted, Sam said. He finished securing his saddlebags, mounted his walker, and rode out of Wilcox without looking back. But he could feel their eyes on him the whole way, and he knew that with absolute certainty that his quiet life was over. Grace Hartley had brought a storm to his door, and whether he liked it or not, he was in it now. The ride back to the ranch took an hour. Sam kept the walker at a steady trot, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. The desert stretched empty and indifferent in all directions, but he'd learned long ago that appearances meant nothing. A man could hide behind a creosote bush if he had the patience and the will. When the ranch buildings came into view, Sam felt some of the tension drain from his shoulders. No smoke rising from anything burning. No strange horses tied outside. Grace was likely still inside, still safe. He dismounted at the barn, unsaddled the walker, and gave the horse a measure of oats before heading to the house. The front door was closed but unlocked. Sam pushed it open and stepped inside, his hand still resting on his Colt. Grace sat at the small kitchen table, the revolver he'd left her within easy reach. She'd changed into one of his shirts, the fabric hanging loose on her frame, and had clearly attempted to wash herself with the water from the pitcher. Her hair was damp and combed back from her face. She looked up as he entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Any trouble? Sam asked finally. No, you? Some. Wade's men were waiting in town, tried to intimidate me. Sheriffs bought and paid for it, just like you said. Grace's expression didn't change. Did you send the telegram? To Marshall Garrett in Tucson. He'll come. Sam moved to the stove and began building a fire to make coffee. But it'll take time. 2, maybe 3 weeks. Wade won't wait that long. I know. Grace stood, the movement still careful, still painful. She crossed the small room until she stood directly in front of Sam. The top of her head barely reached his shoulder. Mr. Crawford, she said. Sam, I meant what I said about my offer. Sam looked down at her, at this woman who'd survived 2 days on a cross in the desert sun and still had the strength to stand here making demands of the universe. Grace, he began, but she cut him off. Let me finish, please. She took a breath. Wade wanted to own me, to take away my choice, my voice, my body. Everything about what he did was about power, about forcing me to bend to his will. But what I'm offering you is the opposite. This is me choosing, me deciding. Do you understand how important that is? Sam understood. He understood more than she probably realized. He'd been in the cavalry. He'd seen what happened when power went unchecked, when strong men decided they could take whatever they wanted from the weak. I understand, he said quietly, but that doesn't make it right. Why not? Grace's eyes flashed. Because you're older than me? Because I'm desperate? Sam, I'm going to be desperate for a while. Maybe a long while. Wade won't stop. Even if Marshall Garrett arrests him, Wade has money and friends. He'll find a way out. I need protection. real protection, and I need to feel like I have some control over my life. This gives me both. Sam turned away, staring at the wall where a photograph of Sarah hung in a simple frame. She looked out at him with the same kind eyes he'd fallen in love with 30 years ago. I loved my wife, he said. After she died, I told myself I'd never feel that way about anyone again. That I'd just exist, work the ranch, raise my boy when I could, and wait for my own death. I've been doing that for 10 years. And has it made you happy? Grace asked. The question hit harder than she probably intended. Had he been happy? No. Content? Maybe. Numb? Definitely. What happens when you realize you don't want this? Sam asked, still not turning around. When you're healthy and Wade's in jail and you understand you don't owe me anything? What then? Then I'll tell you, Grace said simply. But Sam, what if that never happens? What if I keep wanting this? Choosing this? What then? Sam closed his eyes. The truth was, he was tired. Tired of being alone. Tired of the silence. Tired of sleeping in a bed that felt too big and waking to a house that felt too empty. Grace Hartley was offering him something he thought he'd never have again. Not love, maybe, not yet, but companionship, connection, the simple human comfort of not being alone. He turned to face her. 3 times a day? Grace nodded. Morning, noon, and night. That was the offer. And if I agree, you understand this isn't, I'm not taking advantage. This is because you want it. Because I want it, Grace confirmed. Because I choose it. Because I choose you. Sam felt something crack inside his chest, some wall he'd built brick by careful brick over 10 lonely years. It didn't come down all at once. Just a crack. But it was enough. All right, he said. We try it your way. But Grace, the moment you want to stop, you tell me. No judgment, no consequences. You're free to change your mind. Grace smiled and it transformed her face, making her beautiful despite the healing burns and fading bruises. Thank you, she said softly, for seeing me as a person who can make choices, not a victim who needs to be protected from herself. She stepped forward and kissed him. It was gentle, almost chaste, just a press of lips that lasted perhaps 3 seconds. When she pulled back, Sam could see tears in her eyes. I'll start tomorrow morning, she said. Give you time to think about whether you really want this. Then she turned and walked to the smaller bedroom, closing the door quietly behind her. Sam stood alone in the kitchen as darkness gathered outside the windows. He'd made a choice today that would change everything. He knew that, could feel it in his bones like coming weather. He thought about Sarah, about whether she'd forgive him for this. Then he thought about Grace, about the strength it took to survive what she'd survived and still have the courage to choose anything at all. Maybe that was what life was, just a series of choices, each one building on the last, until you arrived at a place you never imagined you'd be. Sam had chosen to save Grace Hartley. Grace had chosen to offer herself in return, and now they would both live with those choices, whatever came next. The storm was coming, but for tonight, in this small house on the edge of the world, there was peace. The rain had stopped. Sam Jr. rubbed his eyes and looked at the clock. 2 in the morning. He dozed in the chair, neck bent at an angle that would punish him later, but his father's voice pulled him back to wakefulness. You all right, Pa? Sam Jr. reached for the water glass on the nightstand. The old man's hand shot out with surprising speed, catching his wrist. The grip was weak but insistent. I need to finish, Samuel Sr. said, his voice a dry rasp. You need to hear about the 6 weeks that followed, the weeks when everything changed. Sam Jr. settled back into the chair, the leather creaking beneath him. Outside, Tucson slept under clearing skies, but in this room the past was more alive than the present. I'm listening, and he said. His father's eyes drifted closed, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed, grown younger, pulling them both back to 1882. The first morning, Grace came to him before dawn. Sam had barely slept, lying in his bed staring at the ceiling beams, wrestling with what he'd agreed to. Part of him hoped she'd changed her mind, that daylight would bring clarity, and she'd realize the offer had been made in trauma and desperation. Another part of him, a part he wasn't proud of, hoped she hadn't. The knock on his door was soft, barely audible. 3 taps, no more. "Come in," Sam said, his voice rough from disuse. The door opened and Grace stood silhouetted in the frame, backlit by the oil lamp she carried. She'd put on the only dress she had, the blue cotton one she'd been wearing when he found her, now washed and mended as best she could manage. Her hair was brushed back and tied with a piece of twine. "I keep my promises," she said simply. Sam sat up, the blanket falling to his waist. He was wearing only his undershirt and trousers, having gone to bed half-dressed in case of emergency. Grace set the lamp on the dresser and moved toward him with the kind of determination that suggested if she hesitated, she might lose her nerve. But there was no hesitation in her eyes, only certainty. What happened next was tender and awkward and brief. Grace was clearly inexperienced, and Sam had been alone for a decade. They fumbled through it like two people learning a dance neither had practiced. When it was over, Grace lay beside him for perhaps 5 minutes, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. Then she rose, dressed, and left without a word. Sam remained in bed, staring at the ceiling again, trying to understand what he felt. Guilt, certainly, but also something else. Something that might have been gratitude or might have been the first stirrings of affection. He couldn't tell yet. He got up, dressed, and went about his morning routine. Fed the horses, checked the fence line nearest the house, drew water from the well. When he came back inside an hour later, Grace had made breakfast. Bacon, eggs, biscuits that were slightly burned but edible. Coffee strong enough to strip paint. They ate in silence, neither acknowledging what had happened. After breakfast, Grace washed the dishes while Sam prepared to ride out and check the western fence line. He was halfway to the barn when Grace called after him. "Noon," she said. Sam turned. She stood on the porch, one hand shading her eyes against the rising sun. "I'll be back," he said. And he was. He came back at noon, and Grace was waiting in the barn, having finished the morning chores of gathering eggs and feeding the chickens. The hayloft provided privacy and relative comfort. Afterwards, Sam returned to his work, and Grace to hers. That evening, after a dinner of venison stew and cornbread, they sat on the porch, watching the sun paint the western sky in shades of orange and red. Grace sat close enough that their shoulders touched. When full dark came, she stood and held out her hand. "Come to bed," she said. This time was different, slower. They'd learned each other a little bit, found a rhythm that worked. When it was done, Grace didn't immediately leave. She stayed, curled against Sam's side, her breathing evening out into sleep. Sam lay awake for a long time, one arm around this woman who'd crashed into his life like a meteor, bringing case and complication in something that felt dangerously like hope. The days developed a pattern. Grace came to him 3 times daily, just as she'd promised. But between those moments, they built something else. A partnership, perhaps, or the beginning of one. Grace proved herself capable and willing. She mended his worn clothing with a skill that spoke of years of practice. She tended the small vegetable garden Sam had neglected, coaxing new life from the stubborn soil. She learned to handle the horses, though they spooked her at first. She was smart and observant and tougher than her small frame suggested. Sam found himself watching her when she didn't know he was looking. Found himself anticipating the times when she'd come to him, not just for the physical release, but for the conversation that sometimes followed. Grace was educated, unusual for a woman of her station. Her mother had taught her to read and write, and she had opinions on everything from politics to the price of beef. On the 9th night, as they lay in the darkness after, Sam asked the question that had been building in him. "Why did Wade fixate on you?" Grace was quiet for so long, Sam thought she wouldn't answer. Then she spoke, her voice soft in the darkness. "He said I looked like his wife, Margaret. She died at 5 years ago in childbirth. The baby died too. Wade loved her, I think, as much as a man like that can love. After she died, he threw himself into building his empire, making money, accumulating power. I think he thought if he was rich enough, important enough, he could somehow undo what happened. Make it not hurt. It doesn't work that way," Sam said. "No, it doesn't." Grace shifted, propping herself up on one elbow to look at him. In the moonlight filtering through the window, her face was all shadows and angles. 3 years ago, when Wade saved my father from the blizzard, I think that's when he first saw me. I was 19. still in mourning for my mother. I was reading Bible verses at her grave when Wade and Papa came back to the house. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. He saw Margaret. He saw what he wanted Margaret to be. His wife was quiet, obedient, everything a proper wife should be. But I'm not. I'm stubborn and opinionated, and I refuse to be anyone's property. Wade thought he could break me, reshape me into the woman he'd lost. The cross in the desert was supposed to be the first lesson. Sam felt his jaw tighten. There won't be a second lesson. Grace smiled and kissed him gently. I know. That's why I'm here. On the 11th day, Sam received a response to his telegram. He was in Wilcox picking up nails and coffee when the telegraph operator flagged him down. The message had come in that morning, Morrison said, and he'd been holding it. Sam took the folded paper and read it standing on the wooden sidewalk outside the Western Union office. Crawford, stop. Received your wire. Stop investigating Wade now. Stop. Serious allegations require solid evidence. Stop. Need victim testimony. Witness statements. Medical documentation. Stop. Wade has political connections. Stop coming in 3 weeks. Stop. Build your case. Stop. Garrett. 3 weeks. Sam folded the telegram and tucked it into his shirt pocket. 3 weeks to gather evidence, to keep Grace safe, to prepare for whatever Wade would do when he realized she was still alive and knew who'd tried to kill her. When Sam returned to the ranch that afternoon, he found Grace in the barn teaching herself to shoot. She'd taken his spare Colt revolver and set up tin cans on the fence rail at 20 paces. As Sam watched from the doorway, she raised the pistol with both hands, sighted carefully, and fired. The can exploded, spinning off into the dirt. Not bad, Sam said. Grace spun, the pistol coming around to point at his chest before she recognized him and lowered it. Her hands were shaking slightly. You scared me, she said. Good instincts, though. Kept the muzzle pointed in a safe direction once you recognized me. Sam walked over and examined the fence rail. She'd hit 3 out of 6 cans. How long you been at this? An hour, maybe. I found the ammunition in the barn. You ever shoot before? Grace shook her head. Papa had a rifle, but he never let me touch it. Said guns weren't for women. Your papa was wrong about a lot of things. Sam took the Colt from her and demonstrated proper grip and stance. Don't lock your elbows. Slight bend absorbs the recoil better, and breathe out before you squeeze the trigger. Don't pull, squeeze. He handed the pistol back and watched as Grace incorporated his suggestions. She fired again, and this time 2 cans jumped off the rail in quick succession. Better, Sam said. Keep practicing. If Wade comes, I want you able to defend yourself. Grace lowered the pistol and looked at him. You think he'll come? I know he will. Got a telegram from Marshal Garrett today. He's investigating, but it'll take 3 weeks before he can get here. Wade will hear about the investigation. He'll know someone talked, and he'll know it was you. So what do? We prepare. Sam gestured for her to follow him back to the house. Inside, he spread a hand-drawn map of the ranch across the kitchen table. We've got natural advantages. The ranch sits in a shallow bowl, which means anyone approaching has to come downhill. That gives us sight lines and makes them work harder. The well is inside the fence perimeter, so they can't cut off our water, and we've got supplies enough for 2 weeks if we're careful. Grace studied the map, her finger tracing the property boundaries. You're talking about a siege. I'm talking about being prepared for one. Wade's got money and men. We've got position and motivation. Sam pointed to 3 spots on the map. I'll set up defensive positions here, here, and here, anywhere with cover and good firing angles. And I'll run tripwires along the perimeter. Piano wire, ankle height. Anyone comes at night, they'll trip and make noise. You've done this before. It wasn't a question, but Sam answered anyway. Cavalry. We held a supply depot against Apache raiders for 3 days with 15 men. Lost 4, but we held. He looked up at Grace. I won't lose you. Grace reached across the table and took his hand. Sam, when this is over, when Wade's in jail and I'm safe, what happens then? Sam had been asking himself the same question. What do you want to happen? I don't know, Grace admitted. This arrangement we have, it started as a transaction. My body for your protection. But Sam, it doesn't feel like a transaction anymore. Does it feel that way to you? Sam looked at their joined hands, calloused and scarred from years of hard work. No, he said quietly. It stopped feeling like a transaction about a week ago. Then what is it? I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out. Grace smiled, the expression lighting up her face in a way that made Sam's chest tighten. Me too. On the 15th day, a visitor arrived. Sam was repairing the eastern fence when he heard a horse approaching. His hand went instinctively to the Winchester leaning against a fence post, but he didn't pick it up yet. Could be a neighbor, could be trouble. Best to wait and see. The rider was a young man, maybe 19 or 20, with dark hair and darker eyes that suggested Mexican heritage. He wore simple work clothes and rode a paint horse that had seen better days. As he got closer, Sam recognized him. Miguel something. He worked odd jobs around Wilcox, mostly for the smaller ranchers who couldn't afford permanent hands. "Mr. Crawford," Miguel called out, raising one hand to show he was unarmed. "I come to talk, yes?" "Talk about what?" Sam's hand remained near the rifle. Miguel dismounted and approached slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. "About Mr. Wade, and about the lady you have at your ranch." Sam's eyes narrowed. "What do you know about that?" "I know Mr. Wade is telling everyone the lady, Miss Grace, she run away to Mexico. But I know this is not true. I know because I was there." "There where?" "In the desert, when they tie her to the cross." Miguel's face twisted with shame and anger. "I work for Mr. Wade then. He pay good money, so I say yes when he asks for help. But I not know what he planned to do. When I see them tie the lady up, I say no, this is wrong. Mr. Wade, he say to me, you help or you die too. So I help. But after, I quit. I tell him I cannot work for a man who do this thing." Sam studied the young man, looking for deception and finding none. Miguel stood there with his hat in his hands, the picture of genuine regret. "Why come to me?" Sam asked. "Because I hear Mr. Wade is planning something. He knows the lady is here. He knows you send telegram to the marshal. He is very angry. He tell his men to watch your ranch, to wait for the right time." Miguel took a step closer, his voice urgent. "Mr. Crawford, he will come, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. But he will come with many men and guns." "How many men?" "6, maybe 7. All good with guns. Some of them, they are not good men. They will do what Mr. Wade says no matter what." Sam absorbed this information, his mind already calculating odds and strategies. 7 against 2, with one of the two being a woman who'd only learned to shoot 2 weeks ago. Bad odds, but he'd faced worse. "Thank you for the warning," Sam said. Miguel nodded, then hesitated. "Mr. Crawford, I have 3 friends. Young men like me, we work the ranches for little money. If you need help, we will come, not for pay, but because what Mr. Wade did, it was wrong. We want to help make it right." Sam considered this. 4 more men would even the odds considerably, but it would also mean putting young men in danger, possibly getting them killed. "I appreciate the offer," Sam said carefully, "but this isn't your fight." "Yes, it is," Miguel said firmly. "Mr. Wade, he think because he has money he can do anything. He treat people like we are animals. Someone must stand against him. Why not us?" Before Sam could respond, Grace appeared on the porch, the Colt revolver visible in her hand. "Sam," she called, "everything all right?" Miguel turned and saw her, and his face went pale. He took off his hat and held it over his heart. "Miss Grace, I am sorry. So sorry for what I do. I did not know. I swear to you. If I know, I would never help him." Grace studied Miguel for a long moment, then descended from the porch and walked over to them. She stopped a few feet away, the pistol now hanging at her side but still in her hand. "You were one of the 4 men," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, miss. I hold your arms while they tie the rope. This shame, it live with me forever." "But you're here now, warning us." "Yes, miss." Grace looked at Sam, some silent communication passing between them, then back at Miguel. "Then we're even. You helped put me on that cross. Now you're trying to help get me off it." Miguel's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Miss Grace. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Grace said. "If Wade comes, you might die helping us. Then I die doing the right thing. That is better than living with shame." Sam made a decision. "Miguel, I'll take your help, you and your 3 friends. Tell them to come in 2 days. Bring rifles if you have them. We'll drill, set up positions, and wait. When Wade comes, we'll be ready." Miguel's face split into a wide smile. "Yes, sir, Mr. Crawford. We will be ready." After Miguel left, Sam and Grace stood in the yard watching the dust from his horse's hooves settle back to earth. "Do you trust him?" Grace asked. "I think so. You?" "Yes, I saw his face when he apologized. That was real." Sam nodded. "Then we've got a chance. Small one, but a chance. That night, Grace came to him as usual, but instead of leaving afterwards, she stayed, curled against his side with her head on his shoulder. "Sam," she said into the darkness, "if we die when Wade comes, I want you to know something. We're not going to die, but if we do," she propped herself up to look at him, "I want you to know that these past 2 weeks have been the happiest of my life, not because of what we do 3 times a day, because for the first time, I feel like someone sees me, really sees me, not as a daughter who should be obedient, or a woman who should be grateful, or a debt to be paid, but as a person who has value just because she exists." Sam felt something crack inside his chest, the same feeling he had had the day she made her offer, but deeper now, stronger. "Grace," he said carefully, because the next words mattered more than any he'd spoken in 10 years. "I see you, and what I see is someone brave and strong and more alive than anyone I've ever met. When this started, I thought I was saving you, but I think maybe you're saving me." Grace kissed him then, and it was different from all the other times. Slower, deeper, full of something that neither of them had names for yet, but both recognized. The 17th day brought a letter. Sam rode to Wilcox in the morning to pick up supplies and check for mail. There was one letter waiting for him at the general store, delivered by the weekly stage from Tucson. The handwriting on the envelope was shaky but legible. Sam opened it, standing on the sidewalk outside the store. "Mr. Crawford, I received your letter. I know my daughter is with you. I know what Wade did. I am a coward. I have been a coward since my wife died. I let Wade threaten me, let him take my daughter, let him nearly kill her because I was afraid. But I am more afraid of losing her forever than I am of Wade. I will testify against him. I will tell the marshal everything. About the debt, about Wade's proposal, about the night they took Grace. But you must know, Wade has discovered that Grace is alive. He has men watching me, and he knows I received your letter. He will come for her soon. Be ready. Tell my daughter I am sorry. Tell her I love her. Tell her I am trying to be the man her mother wanted me to be. Thomas Hartley." Sam folded the letter and looked around the street. How many of these people worked for Wade? How many were watching him right now, ready to report back that Crawford had received mail from Hartley? He finished his shopping quickly and rode back to the ranch at a gallop. Grace met him at the door, concern written across her face. "What happened?" Sam handed her the letter. She read it slowly, her lips moving silently over the words. When she finished, she folded it carefully and held it against her chest. "Papa finally found his courage," she said softly. "He says Wade knows you're here. Says he'll come soon." Grace nodded. "Then we'd better finish preparing." Miguel and his 3 friends arrived the next day as promised. They were all young, all poor, and all willing to risk everything for a woman they barely knew and a cause that wasn't theirs. Sam spent the afternoon teaching them defensive positions in fields of fire. They had 2 decent rifles between them and 1 revolver that looked older than any of them. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. That evening, as Sam and Grace sat on the porch watching the sun set, she spoke without looking at him. "Sam, when I made you the offer, the 3 times a day thing, I meant it as payment, a transaction." "I know, but it's not that anymore. You know that, right?" Sam looked at her profile, the way the fading light caught in her dark hair and turned it copper. "What is it now?" "I don't know, but it's not payment. It's just what I want, what I choose, not because I owe you, but because I want to be with you." Sam reached over and took her hand. "I want that too. Even though I'm young and damaged and brought a war to your doorstep? Especially because of all that." Grace laughed, a sound like water over stone. "You're a strange man, Samuel Crawford. Strange enough to make this work?" "I hope so." The old man's voice faltered, his breathing ragged. Sam Jr. straightened in his chair, concerned. "Pa, you need to rest." "No, Samuel Sr.'s eyes opened, still fierce despite the fever. You need to hear what happened when Wade came, when everything came to a head. Sam Jr. glanced at the window. Dawn was breaking over Tucson, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. They'd been at this all night. I'm listening, Pa. His father nodded and continued, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. On the 23rd day, Benjamin Wade came. It was mid-morning, the sun already brutal in a cloudless sky, and Sam had been checking the tripwires when Miguel, who'd been stationed on the roof of the barn, called out, "Riders! 7 of them!" Sam ran to the house. Grace was already there, the Winchester in her hands, her face pale but determined. The 4 young men took their positions as they'd practiced. 2 at the barn, 2 behind the water trough that sat between the house and the fence. Sam climbed to the roof of the house, lying flat and edging forward until he could see over the false front. 7 horses approached from the north, moving at a walk, confident and unhurried. The man in front rode a black stallion that must have cost more than Sam's entire ranch. He was perhaps 42, broad-shouldered and handsome in a way that suggested good breeding and better nutrition. His clothes were expensive, tailored, unsuited to the desert. This had to be Benjamin Wade. The 7 riders stopped at the fence line, perhaps 80 yards from the house, far enough to be out of easy pistol range, but close enough for a conversation. Wade called out, his voice carrying easily in the still air. "Samuel Crawford, I've come to talk." Sam stayed prone on the roof, Winchester aimed at Wade's center mass. "Then talk. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I have a woman who nearly died because you left her in the desert, if that's what you mean." Wade shifted in his saddle. "Grace Hartley is indebted to me. Her father owes me $2,000. She agreed to marry me to settle that debt. She says different. Says you tried to kill her when she refused. She's hysterical, unreliable. Women often are." Wade's voice took on a reasonable tone, the kind used to explain simple things to simple people. "Mr. Crawford, I don't want trouble with you. You're a good man, a veteran, a rancher trying to make an honest living. This is between me and the Hartley family. Send Grace out, I'll take her home to her father, and you can go back to your life." "Not happening," Sam called back. Wade's reasonable tone hardened. "I'm trying to be civilized about this, but I have 6 armed men with me. You're 1 old soldier with a woman and some farm boys. The math doesn't favor you." "Math doesn't account for motivation," Sam replied. "Your men are hired. We're fighting for something that matters." "Very poetic," Wade laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'll give you 24 hours to reconsider. Tomorrow at this time, I come back. If Grace isn't standing outside that fence ready to leave with me, I'll burn your ranch to the ground and kill everyone in it. You do that, Wade, and you'll hang for murder." "Will I?" Wade gestured broadly at the empty desert around them. "Who'll witness it? Who'll testify? I own the sheriff, I own the judges, and I own this county." "You're a ghost, Crawford, a man who lives alone and talks to no one. If you disappear, who'll even notice?" Before Sam could respond, another voice cut through the air, strong, authoritative, unexpected. "I'll notice." Sam's heart leaped. He knew that voice. From the south, another group of riders appeared, 3 men moving fast. The one in front wore a coat despite the heat, and even from a distance, Sam could see the glint of a badge on his chest. Marshal David Garrett had arrived. Wade turned his horse, confusion evident in the movement. His 6 men shifted nervously, hands dropping to their weapons. Garrett rode up to within 30 yards and stopped, his 2 deputies fanning out on either side. All 3 had rifles drawn and pointed at Wade's group. "Benjamin Wade," Garrett's voice carried the weight of federal authority. "I'm United States Marshal David Garrett. I have warrants." Wade's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally resignation. "Marshal Garrett, I don't know what lies you've been told, but this is a county matter. You have no jurisdiction here. Attempted murder crosses territorial lines, which makes it my business." Garrett pulled folded papers from his coat. "I have medical documentation from Dr. Bow, Helen Marsh confirming severe dehydration, rope burns, and sun poisoning consistent with desert exposure. I have a sworn statement from Thomas Hartley confirming your coercive marriage proposal." And I have testimony from 4 witnesses who say you left Grace Hartley tied to a cross in the desert for 2 days. Those witnesses are lying. They work for Crawford. They'll say anything. One of them is your former employee, Garrett countered. Miguel Ortiz. He quit your employ after participating in the incident. His testimony is particularly damaging because he has no reason to lie and everything to lose. Wade's composure finally cracked. His face flushed red and his hand moved toward the pistol at his hip. Don't, Garrett said softly. I have 3 rifles on you. Your men know this is over. Look at them. Wade turned and saw what Sam could see from the roof. His 6 hired guns were already backing their horses away, hands well clear of their weapons. They were professionals. They knew when a fight was lost before it started. Damn you all, Wade whispered. Grace appeared on the porch then, stepping into view with the Winchester still in her hands. Wade's eyes locked on her, and something passed across his face. Pain, longing, desperation. Grace, he said, his voice breaking. I just wanted to give you everything. A home, security, respect. Everything I gave Margaret. Why wouldn't you let me love you? Grace's voice was steady, clear, strong. Because love isn't something you take, Benjamin. It's something you earn, and you never even tried. Wade slumped in his saddle as if she'd shot him. Garrett moved his horse forward. Benjamin Wade, you're under arrest for attempted murder of Grace Hartley. Deputy, cuff him. One of Garrett's men moved to comply. Wade didn't resist. He sat there like a man who'd just watched his entire world collapse around him, which Sam supposed he had. As the deputies led Wade away, Garrett rode over to the house. Sam climbed down from the roof, Grace came down from the porch, and they met the marshal in the yard. Garrett, Sam said, gripping his old friend's hand, you made good time. Pushed hard the last 2 days. Got your telegram, then got word from my contacts that Wade was planning something today. Figured I'd better arrive before the shooting started instead of after. Garrett tipped his hat to Grace. Miss Hartley, I presume. Mrs. Crawford, actually, Grace said, and Sam felt his heart stop. Garrett's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. He looked at Sam, then back at Grace, then at Sam again. Well now, that's an interesting development. It's complicated, Sam managed. I bet it is. Garrett grinned, but smart. Husband and wife can't be compelled to testify against each other, and it looks a lot better to a jury if Crawford was protecting his wife instead of harboring an unmarried woman. Who officiated? No one yet, Grace said. But we will. Soon. Garrett laughed, the sound booming across the yard. I can do it. Federal Marshal has that authority in the territories. We can make it official right now if you want. Sam looked at Grace. They'd never discussed marriage. The arrangement they had was complicated enough without adding legal entanglements. But Grace was looking back at him with an expression that suggested she'd already made up her mind. Sam, she said softly, just for him, this stopped being an arrangement a week ago. You know that. So let's make it real. Let's choose each other, officially, in front of witnesses. Not because we have to, because we want to. Sam thought about the 10 years he'd spent alone. Thought about Sarah and how much he'd loved her. Thought about Grace and how she'd brought him back to life when he'd been convinced he was dead. Thought about the future, uncertain and dangerous as it was. All right, he said. Let's do it. They were married in the yard of Crawford Ranch with Miguel and his 3 friends as witnesses, along with Garrett's 2 deputies. It took 5 minutes. Garrett spoke the words from memory, Sam and Grace repeated their vows, and just like that, Samuel Crawford had a wife again. Afterward, as Garrett and his deputies prepared to transport Wade to Tucson for trial, the marshal pulled Sam aside. There's going to be a trial in 6 weeks, Garrett said quietly. Cochise County Court. Grace will have to testify. Wade's lawyer is Silas Blackwood out of Phoenix. He's good, and he's expensive, and he'll do everything he can to discredit her testimony. How? By making her look like an opportunist. Young woman moves in with older man immediately after near-death experience. Marries him within 3 weeks. Blackwood will argue she's lying about Wade to justify her own immoral behavior. Sam felt his jaw tighten. That's not what happened. I know that. You know that. But juries can be swayed. Garrett clapped Sam on the shoulder. Just be prepared. This isn't over yet. Wade may be arrested, but he's got money and connections. The fight's just beginning. Sam nodded, knowing Garrett was right. This victory was temporary. The real battle would come in 6 weeks in a courtroom where words mattered more than truth. The rest of that day passed in a strange haze. Miguel and his friends stayed for supper, celebrating Wade's arrest with quiet satisfaction. They left at dusk, promising to check on the ranch while Sam and Grace prepared for the trial. As darkness fell, Sam and Grace found themselves alone for the first time since the confrontation. They sat on the porch in silence, neither quite believing it was over. Or rather, that this chapter was over and a new one was beginning. Marshall Garrett was right, Grace said finally, about how they'll try to make me look. I know. And he was right about marriage making it cleaner legally. She turned to look at him. But Sam, we just got married in front of witnesses because it was the smart tactical move. I need to know. Did it mean anything to you, beyond strategy? Sam was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars emerge one by one. It meant everything, he said finally. Strategy or not, when I said those vows, I meant them. Did you? Every word. They sat in silence for a while longer, hands joined, watching the darkness deepen over the desert. Tomorrow they would begin preparing for the trial. But tonight they had this moment of peace. Grace took his hand, her fingers lacing through his. 3 times a day was supposed to save my life, she said softly. But somewhere along the way, it became something else. What did it become? Sam asked. Grace looked up at him, and in her eyes, he saw everything they'd been through and everything they might yet face. It became choosing you, she said. Every morning, every noon, every night. Not because of a promise, but because I want to. Because I love you. Sam pulled her close, and they stood there as the sun climbed higher and the desert heat pressed down like a weight. They'd won today. Wade was arrested, Grace was safe, and they had each other. But the trial still loomed ahead, and with it, questions neither of them could answer yet. For now, though, they had this moment. And for Sam Crawford, who'd been alone for so long, he'd forgotten what connection felt like. It was enough. The first light of dawn crept through the curtains, painting the room in shades of gray and amber. Sam Jr. had been awake for hours, watching his father drift in and out of consciousness, each breath a struggle, each moment feeling like it might be the last. But the old man's eyes opened again, clear and focused, despite the fever that burned through him. You still here, son? Samuel Sr.'s voice was barely a whisper. Where else would I be? Sam Jr. leaned forward, offering water. His father took a sip, then waved the glass away. Need to finish the story about the trial, about what happened after. The old man's hand gripped the blanket, knuckles white with effort. About the day I nearly died, and Grace saved me like I'd saved her. Sam Jr. settled back into the chair, the leather worn smooth from the long night. I'm listening, Pa. His father's eyes drifted closed again, but his voice grew stronger, pulling them both back across 40 years to the moment when everything changed. The 6 weeks between Wade's arrest and the trial passed in a strange twilight of anticipation and dread. Sam and Grace lived as husband and wife, the pretense having become reality so gradually neither could say exactly when the transformation occurred. What had begun as a desperate transaction had evolved into something neither had expected, genuine partnership, and perhaps even love. Now it was simply how they expressed what words couldn't capture. Grace bloomed under the combination of safety and purpose. Her burns healed, leaving only faint scars on her wrists where the ropes had cut deepest. She put on weight, her face filling out until Sam could see the woman she'd been before Wade had tried to destroy her. She learned to shoot with accuracy that impressed even Miguel, who'd grown up hunting with his father. She read Sam's small collection of books cover to cover, then read them again, hungry for any escape the written word could provide. Sam worked the ranch with renewed energy, as if Grace's presence had given him a reason to care about the future. He repaired fences that had sagged for years. He broke 3 young horses that had been running wild on his property. He even started planning to expand the house, drawing rough sketches of a second bedroom and a proper kitchen. They didn't talk much about the trial. It loomed ahead of them like a storm cloud, inevitable and approaching. But while they waited, they built something neither had expected to find: a life together, a partnership that went beyond physical need or legal convenience. But the storm was coming. On the 40th day, Sam woke before dawn feeling wrong. His chest was tight, his breathing shallow. When he swung his legs out of bed, dizziness washed over him, and he had to grip the bed frame to keep from falling. Sam? Grace stirred beside him, her hand reaching for him in the darkness. Are you all right? Fine, he lied. Just moving too fast. But he wasn't fine. He'd been pushing himself too hard for weeks, working dawn to dusk and beyond, running on determination and coffee. His body, 48 years old and carrying the accumulated damage of cavalry campaigns and ranch work, was finally demanding payment. He forced himself through the morning routine, fed the horses, though his hands shook on the bucket handles, checked the fence lines, though his vision kept blurring at the edges. When he returned to the house for the midday meal, Grace took one look at him and set down her spoon. You're sick, she said flatly. I'm tired. You're sick and you're lying about it. Grace stood and pressed her palm to his forehead. Her hand came away alarmed. Sam, you're burning up. I'll rest this afternoon. You'll see Dr. Marsh. Today. Sam wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. He let Grace harness the wagon and drive them into Wilcox, where Dr. Helen Marsh maintained a small practice in a building that served as both her office and her home. Dr. Marsh was perhaps 40, a widow who'd studied medicine back east before moving to Arizona Territory for reasons she never discussed. She took one look at Sam and pointed to the examination table. How long have you been running a fever? She asked, pulling out her stethoscope. Didn't know I was, Sam replied. Don't lie to the doctor, Sam. Grace stood in the corner, arms crossed, worried and angry in equal measure. Dr. Marsh examined him thoroughly, listening to his lungs, checking his pulse, peering into his eye and throat. When she finished, her expression was grave. You're exhausted, she said, completely and utterly exhausted. Your body is trying to shut down before you kill it with work. You need complete rest for at least 2 weeks. No labor, no stress, minimal activity. Can't, Sam said. Trial starts in 3 days. Then you'll collapse during the trial. Dr. Marsh's tone left no room for argument. Mr. Crawford, you're not 20 years old anymore. You can't work yourself like this and expect to simply push through. Your body is giving you a warning. Listen to it or face the consequences. But Sam didn't listen. He couldn't afford to. The trial was too important, the stakes too high. Grace needed him there, needed him strong and present and capable of protecting her if things went wrong. So he ignored the weakness, ignored the way his hands trembled and his vision swam. He showed up at the Cochise County Courthouse on the morning of day 43, looking pale but determined, Grace on his arm, ready to face whatever came next. The courthouse was a substantial brick building in the center of Wilcox, built 5 years earlier when the town had ambitions of becoming the county seat. The courtroom itself could hold perhaps 200 people, and every seat was filled. The trial of Benjamin Wade had become the biggest event Cochise County had seen in years. Judge Morrison, no relation to Sam despite the shared name, presided from a raised bench that gave him a view of the entire room. He was perhaps 65 with white hair and a face like eroded sandstone. He'd been appointed by the territorial governor and had a reputation for fairness tempered by pragmatism. The jury sat in a box to the judge's right, 12 men, all white, all property owners. This was 1882 Arizona Territory. Women, Mexicans, and Indians couldn't serve on juries. Sam studied their faces and saw farmers, ranchers, shopkeepers, working men who might sympathize with Grace's plight or might resent a woman who'd refused a wealthy suitor. Marshal Garrett sat at the prosecution table, an unusual arrangement but not unheard of in the territories where legal roles were more fluid. Beside him sat a young clerk taking notes. At the defense table, Silas Blackwood held court. He was perhaps 50, dressed in a suit that cost more than most people in the room made in 6 months. His face was sharp, intelligent, predatory. Sam had seen men like Blackwood before. Lawyers who could argue black was white and make you believe it. Benjamin Wade sat beside Blackwood, looking diminished in his jail-issue clothes. He'd lost weight during his 6 weeks in custody, his face gaunt and gray. When his eyes found Grace in the gallery, something flickered across his features. Regret, maybe, or hunger that prison couldn't kill. Judge Morrison gavelled the court to order, and the trial began. Garrett's opening statement was direct and devastating. He laid out the facts without embellishment. Grace Hartley had refused Wade's marriage proposal 3 times. On the night of August 17th, Wade and 4 accomplices had abducted her, transported her to the desert, and tied her to a wooden cross where she remained for approximately 48 hours without water or shade. She was discovered by Samuel Crawford, who saved her life. Medical evidence supported her account. Witness testimony supported her account. Wade was guilty of attempted murder. Blackwood's opening was more theatrical. He painted Wade as a lonely widower, driven to temporary madness by grief and obsession. He'd made a terrible mistake, yes, but attempted murder required intent to kill. Wade had believed someone would find Grace within hours. He'd meant to frighten her, not kill her. It was criminal, certainly, but it was reckless endangerment, not murder. And as for the victim's credibility, well, the jury would have to decide whether a woman who moved in with an older man immediately after her ordeal, who married him within weeks, was a reliable witness or an opportunist capitalizing on a tragedy. The first day of testimony belonged to Grace. She took the stand wearing the same blue dress she'd been wearing when Sam found her, now carefully mended. She'd insisted on wearing it despite Sam's offer to buy her something new. She wanted the jury to see what she'd been wearing when Wade left her to die. Garrett led her through her testimony with care. Grace spoke clearly, never wavering, describing the months of unwanted attention from Wade, the threats against her father, the night of her abduction, and the 2 days on the cross. She answered every question without hesitation, her voice steady even when describing the moment she'd been certain she would die. When Garrett finished, Blackwood rose for cross-examination. "Mrs. Crawford," he began, emphasizing her married name. "Or should I say Miss Hartley, since you only became Mrs. Crawford a few weeks ago?" "My legal name is Grace Crawford," Grace replied evenly. "Yes, how convenient." Blackwood smiled, all teeth and no warmth. "Tell me, Mrs. Crawford, when exactly did you and Samuel Crawford begin your relationship?" "He saved my life on August 19th. "That's when you met. I asked when your relationship began." Grace's jaw tightened. "He nursed me back to health. We grew close during that time." "How close?" Blackwood leaned against the jury rail, playing to his audience. "Close enough that you moved into his home immediately? Close enough that within days you were sharing his bed?" Garrett stood. "Objection. This is character assassination, not relevant questioning." "It goes to credibility, Your Honor," Blackwood countered. "The witness claims my client tried to kill her, but her behavior after the alleged crime suggests something else entirely. It suggests a woman who saw an opportunity to escape poverty by attaching herself to a man with property." Judge Morrison frowned. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Mr. Blackwood." Blackwood turned back to Grace. "Let me ask directly, Mrs. Crawford. Did you exchange sexual favors for Mr. Crawford's protection?" The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Sam half rose from his seat, his hand moving toward the Colt he had been forced to surrender at the courthouse door. Garrett grabbed his arm and yanked him back down. Grace's face had gone pale, but her voice remained steady. "Mr. Crawford never asked me for anything. I offered myself freely because I had nothing else to give someone who'd saved my life." "So you admit it? You prostituted yourself to Mr. Crawford in exchange for shelter?" "No." Grace's eyes blazed. "Prostitution is selling yourself. I gave myself. There's a difference." "Is there?" Blackwood's smile widened. "It seems to me you're splitting hairs, Mrs. Crawford. You traded your body for protection. That's the oldest transaction in human history. And now you're here claiming my client tried to kill you, when the truth is you simply chose one man over another and needed a story to justify your choice." "That's not true, isn't it? Tell me, Mrs. Crawford, how long did you know Mr. Crawford before you married him? 3 weeks? 4? 3 weeks. And in those 3 weeks, you went from near death to healthy enough to engage in regular sexual relations with a man 26 years your senior. Some might say you recovered remarkably quickly." Grace's hands gripped the arms of the witness chair. "Some might say I had something worth living for." "Or someone." Blackwood let the implication hang. "Mrs. Crawford, I put it to you that you weren't nearly as injured as you claim, that you exaggerated your condition to gain sympathy, that you saw an opportunity with Mr. Crawford and you took it, And now you're lying about my client to justify your own immoral behavior. I'm not lying. Can you prove it? Can you prove you were actually dying when Mr. Crawford found you? The medical evidence proves it. Medical evidence examined weeks after the fact by a doctor who never saw you in your alleged injured state. All we have is your word, Mrs. Crawford. The word of a woman who admits she sold herself for protection. Why should this jury believe you? Grace looked directly at the jury, her voice carrying across the courtroom. Because Benjamin Wade tied me to that cross himself. Because I felt the rope cut into my wrists. Because I spent 2 days praying someone would find me before the vultures did. Because I would have died if Sam Crawford hadn't saved me. That's why you should believe me. Because it's the truth. The courtroom was silent. Blackwood studied Grace for a long moment, then shook his head. No further questions. Grace stepped down from the witness stand and returned to sit beside Sam. Her hands were shaking now that the ordeal was over. Sam took one hand in both of his and held tight. You did well, he whispered. I don't know if it was enough. Sam didn't either. That night, back at the small boarding house where they were staying during the trial, Grace finally broke down. She'd held herself together through the entire day, through Blackwood's accusations and the jury's scrutinizing stares. But alone with Sam, the walls came down. He made me sound like a whore, she whispered, her voice breaking. Like I sold myself, like none of it was real. Sam pulled her close. The jury saw you, Grace. They saw your strength, they saw the throne. Did they? Or did they see what Blackwood wanted them to see? A young woman who latched onto an older man out of desperation? They saw a survivor, Sam said firmly. And tomorrow, Dr. Marsh will confirm everything you said. The evidence will speak for itself. Grace nodded against his chest, but Sam could feel her trembling. The trial was taking its toll on both of them, but Grace was bearing the heavier burden. All he could do was hold her and hope it would be enough. The second day brought medical testimony from DeMarsh. She described Grace's condition when she'd examined her 5 days after the rescue. Severe dehydration, second-degree burns, infected rope wounds, significant weight loss. In her professional opinion, Grace had been within 12 to 24 hours of death when found. Blackwood tried to shake her testimony, but Dr. Marsh was unshakable. She documented everything, taken detailed notes, and could cite medical literature to support every conclusion. When she stepped down, even Blackwood looked frustrated. Thomas Hartley testified next, and Sam watched Grace's father with mixed feelings. Thomas was perhaps 50, but looked older, worn down by guilt and alcohol. He spoke quietly, often repeating himself, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. Garrett led him through his testimony. The debt to Wade, Wade's proposal, Grace's refusals, the night Wade's men had come to take Grace. Thomas admitted his own cowardice, his failure to protect his daughter. His voice broke when he described learning Grace was missing and Wade's claim that she'd run away. Did you believe him? Garrett asked. No, Thomas whispered, but I was too frightened to say so. And now? No, I'm more frightened of losing my daughter forever than I am of Benjamin Wade. Blackwood's cross-examination was brutal. He forced Thomas to admit his alcoholism, his debts, his weakness. He suggested that Thomas was lying now to absolve his own guilt, that he'd agreed to the marriage and was rewriting history to paint himself as a victim. Thomas absorbed the attacks without defending himself. He looked at Grace once, his eyes pleading for forgiveness, then looked away when he couldn't hold her gaze. When Thomas stepped down, Grace surprised everyone by standing and walking to him. She didn't speak, just took his hand and squeezed it once. Thomas's face crumpled, and tears ran down his weathered cheeks. Miguel testified on the third day, along with the 3 other men who'd helped tie Grace to the cross. All 4 confirmed the basic facts. Wade had paid them $50 each. He'd personally supervised Grace's binding. He'd told them explicitly not to check on her for 3 days. Blackwood tried to discredit them as Wade's former employees with grudges, but their testimony was too consistent, too detailed. These were working men with nothing to gain and potentially much to lose by testifying against one of the county's wealthiest citizens. By the end of the third day, the prosecution had presented a compelling case. Grace had been abducted, tied to a cross, and left to die. Wade had orchestrated it. The only question was whether it constituted attempted murder or the lesser charge of reckless endangerment. The fourth day belonged to the defense. Wade took the stand, and Sam had to admit the man was a compelling witness. He admitted everything. Yes, he'd tied Grace to the cross. Yes, he'd left her there. But he swore with tears in his eyes that he'd never meant to kill her. I loved her, Wade said, his voice breaking. I know that's hard to understand. I know I went about it all wrong. But when you lose someone the way I lost Margaret, when you watch your wife and child die in front of you, it does something to you. It breaks something at the that never heals right. Blackwood led him through his testimony carefully. The 3 years since Margaret's death, the loneliness that aided him, seeing Grace and believing God had given him a second chance. The growing desperation as she refused him again and again. I thought if she understood how dangerous the world was without me, she'd accept my protection, Wade said. I know it was wrong. I know I went too far. But I never meant to kill her. I swear before God, I never meant to kill her. Garrett's cross-examination tried to shake Wade's story but couldn't find purchase. Wade stuck to his version. Temporary insanity brought on by grief. Terrible judgment. Criminal behavior, certainly, but not murder. When Wade stepped down, Sam had to admit the man had performed well. Half the jury looked sympathetic. The closing arguments came on the fifth day. Garrett was methodical, laying out the evidence piece by piece, building an unassailable wall of facts. Wade had abducted Grace. Wade had tied her to a cross. Wade had told his men not to check on her. Medical evidence showed she would have died. Therefore, Wade had attempted to murder her. Blackwood was passionate, appealing to the jury's emotions. Wade was a broken man who'd made a terrible mistake. He'd lost everything: his wife, his child, his reputation. He'd be punished, certainly, but attempted murder required intent to kill. At worst, this was reckless endangerment. At best, it was temporary insanity. The jury retired to deliberate at 3 in the afternoon. Sam and Grace waited in the courthouse hallway, sitting on a hard wooden bench. Sam's head was pounding, his vision swimming. The fever he'd been fighting for days had worsened, aggravated by stress and lack of sleep. But he couldn't show weakness, not now. Grace needed him strong. "What are you thinking?" Grace asked quietly. That it could go either way. Garrett built a good case, but Blackwood planted doubt. Sam's hands were shaking. He clasped them together to hide it. Juries are unpredictable. Sam. Grace's hand on his forehead was cool and alarmed. "You're burning up." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You haven't been fine for days." Grace stood and looked around for Dr. Marsh, who'd been sitting with them earlier, but had stepped away. "Grace, I'm fine, just tired. Once this is over, I'll rest." But even as he said it, Sam felt the world starting to tilt. The walls of the courthouse hallway seemed to bend inward, the floor rushing up toward his face. He tried to stand, tried to say something, but his body had finally decided it was done listening to him. The last thing Sam heard before the darkness took him was Grace screaming his name. He woke in Dr. Marsh's clinic, sunlight streaming through a window, and Grace asleep in a chair beside his bed. Sam tried to sit up and couldn't. His body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Don't move." Marsh appeared beside the bed, her hand on his wrist checking his pulse. "You collapsed in the courthouse. Your fever spiked to 105 degrees. You nearly died, Samuel Crawford." "The verdict?" Sam croaked. "Did they reach a verdict?" "Yes, 3 hours after you collapsed, guilty of attempted murder." Wade was sentenced to 15 years at Yuma Territorial Prison. Relief washed over Sam, so intense it was almost painful. "Grace? She's been here for 2 days. She hasn't left your side except to use the necessary. She saved your life, Sam. She did for you what you did for her." Sam looked at Grace, seeing her clearly for the first time. She was thinner, exhausted, her face drawn with worry. Even in sleep, she held his hand. "How bad was I?" Sam asked. "As bad as Grace was when you found her. Maybe worse. Pneumonia on top of complete physical collapse. Your body just gave up." DeMarsh's expression was stern. "You'll need complete bed rest for at least 2 weeks. No work, no stress, minimal movement. If you don't follow my orders this time, you'll die. It's that simple." Sam nodded, too weak to argue. Marsh left, and Sam lay there holding Grace's hand, watching her sleep. Slowly, her eyes opened. When she saw he was awake, tears spilled down her cheeks. "You scared me," she whispered. "I thought I'd lose you. Takes more than a fever to kill an old cavalry soldier." "Don't joke." Grace's grip on his hand tightened. "Sam, you nearly died. For 2 days I sat here watching you drift away, and there was nothing I could do except what you did for me. Cool your fever, give you water, and pray. And it worked. This time. But Sam, you can't do this again. You can't work yourself to death just because you think you need to be strong for me. I'm strong enough for both of us if I need to be." Sam looked at her, this woman who'd survived a cross in the desert, endured a brutal trial, and then nursed him back from the edge of death. "I know you are. Then promise me. Promise you will rest. Promise you will let me take care of you the way you took care of me." "I promise." The next 2 weeks passed in a haze of healing. Grace proved herself as capable a nurse as Sam had been. She cooked nourishing meals, changed his sweat-soaked sheets, and forced him to stay in bed even when he felt well enough to move around. Miguel and his friends took over the ranch work, refusing payment, saying they owed Sam and Grace a debt that couldn't be repaid. During those long days of recovery, Sam and Grace talked more than they had in all the weeks before. They talked about their pasts, their fears, their hopes for a future that was no longer theoretical, but real and approaching fast. "What happens now?" Sam asked one afternoon as Grace sat beside his bed mending one of his shirts. "What do you want to happen?" "I want you to stay. Not because of the arrangement we made, not because of the trial or Wade or any of that, but because I want to wake up beside you every morning for whatever time I have left." Grace set down her mending and looked at him. "Sam, when I offered myself to you that first time, I thought I was making a transaction, my body for your protection. But somewhere between that first morning and now, it stopped being a transaction and started being something else." "What?" "Love." The word hung in the air between them, simple and profound. "I love you, Sam Crawford. Not because you saved me, though you did. Not because you're protecting me, though you are. But because you're you, because you're kind and strong, and you see me as a person, not property. Because when I'm with you, I feel safe enough to be myself." Sam felt his throat tighten. "I love you too. I thought I'd never say those words again after Sarah died. But Grace, you brought me back to life. You made me remember what it feels like to be human instead of just existing." Grace leaned down and kissed him gently. "Then we're agreed. This is real. We choose each other, not out of necessity, but because we want to." "We choose each other," Sam repeated. 6 months later, life had settled into a new rhythm at Crawford Ranch. Sam had recovered fully, though Dr. Marsh's warnings about his age and limitations had finally sunk in. He worked smarter now, not harder, delegating tasks to Miguel and the others who'd become permanent fixtures on the ranch. Grace was pregnant, 4 months along, her belly just starting to show. Dr. Marsh had examined her and declared mother and baby healthy. Sam was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. He'd be 49 when the baby was born. Old to be a new father, but Grace just laughed at his worries and told him they'd figure it out together. A letter had arrived from Yuma prison. Wade writing from his cell. Sam had wanted to burn it unread, but Grace insisted they look at it together. The letter was brief. "Grace and Samuel, I heard about your pregnancy. Congratulations. I mean that. I've had 6 months to think about what I did, to understand how wrong I was. Not just legally wrong, but morally wrong. I tried to own you, Grace. I tried to force you to replace what I'd lost. I understand now that's not love. Love is choosing someone and being chosen in return. You chose Samuel. He chose you. That's what I never had with Margaret and what I could never have with you. My punishment is knowing what real love looks like and understanding I'll never experience it. Be happy. You earned it. Benjamin Wade." Grace folded the letter carefully. "Do you think he means it?" "Does it matter?" Sam asked. "No, I suppose it doesn't." Grace placed one hand on her belly. "He's part of our story, but he's not part of our future." Sam pulled her close, and they stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and red. They'd survived so much. The cross, the trial, Sam's near death. They'd earned this peace, this moment, this life they were building together. But peace, Sam had learned, was fragile. And life had a way of taking more than it gave. The room in Tucson was silent except for the old man's labored breathing. Sam Jr. leaned forward, his voice gentle. Pa, what happened next? Samuel Sr.'s eyes opened, roomy but still clear. Grace died, son, 7 months after that letter from Wade. She went into labor early. Baby boy, we named him Thomas after her father. But there were complications. Bleeding that Dr. Marsh couldn't stop. Grace died 3 days after giving birth. Sam Jr. felt his heart constrict. And the baby? Little Thomas lived 2 weeks. Then he caught a fever, just stopped breathing one night. I buried them both under the mesquite tree where I'd found Grace on that cross. Seemed fitting somehow. Pa, I'm so sorry. After that, I couldn't stay at the ranch. Everything reminded me of her. I sold it, moved here to Tucson, brought you back to live with me. You were 9 years old. You remember that? Sam Jr. did remember. Remembered his father arriving one day and announcing they'd be living together now. Remembered how his father had seemed older, hollowed out by some grief he never explained. Why didn't you ever tell me? Sam Jr. asked. Because I was ashamed. I'd lived when Grace died, when Thomas died. Your mother Sarah had died, and I'd lived through that too. I felt like everything I loved turned to dust. I thought if I told you about Grace, I'd have to face how much it still hurt. The old man's hand found his son's. But I need you to know now, before I go. I need you to understand. Understand what? That love is worth the pain. I lost Grace. I lost little Thomas. I've carried that grief for 40 years. But son, those 7 months with her were the happiest of my life. I'd do it all again, knowing how it ended, just to have those 7 months. Sam Jr. felt tears on his face. What do you want me to do with this story, Pa? Live it. You're 48 years old and you've never married. Never let yourself love anyone because you're afraid of losing them. You're afraid of ending up like me. But son, I didn't end up broken because I loved Grace. I would have been broken without her. She saved me. For 7 months, she made me alive again. That's worth everything. The old man's breathing was becoming shallower, each word an effort. There's a box under my bed. In it, you'll find a red thread. That was Grace's wedding ring, and a letter she wrote me before Thomas was born in case she didn't survive. Read it. Then decide how you want to live the rest of your life. Pa, don't go. Not yet. It's time, son. Grace has been waiting 40 years. That's long enough. Samuel Sr.'s eyes drifted closed, a smile touching his lips. 3 times a day, she promised. 3 times a day, she chose me. Best promise anyone ever made me, Sam Jr. held his father's hand as the sun rose over Tucson, painting the room in golden light. The old man's breathing slowed, became peaceful, and then stopped. Samuel Crawford Sr. was gone. After the funeral, after the relatives had left and the condolences had been spoken, Sam Jr. returned to his father's house and retrieved the box from under the bed. Inside, he found the red thread, faded but intact, in a letter in careful feminine handwriting. He read it standing in the room where his father had died, tears streaming down his face. The letter was exactly as his father had described. Grace Crawford's final words to the man she loved. Instructions to keep choosing love, to not let grief destroy him, to remember that their time together, however brief, had been worth everything. At the bottom, a postscript. 3 times a day was never about duty. It was about choosing you. Keep choosing love, Sam, even after I'm gone. Especially after I'm gone. That's how you honor what we had. Sam Jr. folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box with the red thread. Then he sat in his father's chair and thought about his own life, about the woman he'd been courting carefully, keeping at arm's length because he was afraid of what love might cost. His father had paid that cost, had loved Grace Crawford knowing it would destroy him when she died, and he'd called it worth it, had smiled as he died, thinking of 7 months 40 years ago when a woman had chosen him 3 times a day. Sam Jr. stood, picked up the telephone, and called the woman he'd been too afraid to love. "Eleanor," he said when she answered, "can I see you tonight? There's something I need to tell you about being brave enough to choose love." As he hung up, Sam Jr. looked at the photograph on his father's desk. A young couple on the porch of a ranch house, the man's arm around the woman's waist, both of them smiling at the camera with the kind of joy that comes from knowing you found something rare and precious. Samuel and Grace Crawford, 1883, 7 months before everything ended, but also 7 months when everything was perfect. His father had been right. Love was worth the pain, and Sam Jr. was finally ready to take that risk. Outside, the Arizona sun climbed higher, burning away the morning chill, bringing light to a world that sometimes took more than it gave, but also occasionally offered grace. The kind of grace that came in unexpected forms, that survived crosses and trials and death itself, that echoed across 40 years and taught a son what his father had learned in 7 perfect months. That love, real love, the kind you choose 3 times a day and every day after, was the only thing in this hard world truly worth dying for. And more importantly, the only thing worth living for.